There are things in this world we can't explain. Places that feel wrong the moment you step inside. I used to laugh at ghost stories. I thought people exaggerated. But everything changed the day we moved into a little white farmhouse, hidden in the hills of Hinsdale, New York. I don't know what lived in that house, but whatever it was, it wanted us gone. I remember the day we moved in like it was yesterday. It was the summer of 1973. My husband Phil and I wanted a fresh start, a quiet place to raise our kids, somewhere far away from the chaos of the city. The house looked perfect, old but charming, with a white wooden frame and a wraparound porch. It sat alone in the woods, perched on a hill like it was watching the town below. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was still, heavy, like the house had been holding its breath. The neighbors didn't help. One man, I can still see his face, looked straight at me and said, "That place has a history." Then he walked away without another word. I should have listened. It started small, just little things. Footsteps upstairs when no one was there. Whispers in empty rooms. Lights flickering even after we fixed the wiring. My daughter Laura was the first to see her. One night she ran into our room screaming, pale as snow. "There's a woman," she said, "outside my window, floating." I checked. There was nothing. But the look in her eyes, she wasn't lying. The dog refused to go near the stairs. The cat hissed at thin air. And every night I'd wake up, feeling like someone was watching me from the hallway. We weren't alone in that house. Phil tried to stay calm, said maybe it was just the house settling, stress, imagination. But one night, that changed. He stepped outside after dinner to smoke and came back inside, shaking. There was something in the woods, he said, tall, just standing there. He said it didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. That same night, every door in the house slammed shut at once. The kids cried. I clutched a cross in my hand so tight it left marks. Whatever it was, it wanted us to know it was there. Eventually, we called for help. A priest, paranormal researchers, psychics, anyone who would believe us. One group brought equipment, cameras, thermometers, recorders. They captured strange audio, whispering voices calling out our names. One woman insisted we hold a seance. I didn't want to, but I was desperate. We sat in a circle, lit candles, closed our eyes. She asked if any spirits were present. The candle flames flared, then died out. The room went ice cold, and then I heard it. A voice, not from anyone at the table. A woman's voice. "Get out." Then the table shook. One of the glasses flew off and shattered against the wall. That was the last seance we ever did. Laura kept seeing her. She'd draw pictures of a woman in a long white dress, hair covering her face. "She's in my room," she said. "She watches me sleep." At first I thought maybe she was imagining things, until I saw it myself. It was late. I got up to check on the kids and saw her at the end of the hallway, floating, not walking, floating. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. She looked up and vanished. I ran to the bedroom and locked the door. That night I didn't sleep. There was something about the basement. None of us liked going down there. Even the light refused to stay on. We replaced the bulb 5 times. It always burned out. One night I heard a humming sound, coming from the basement door, like a woman singing a lullaby. I opened the door, and the humming stopped. But then I saw them, handprints, small child-sized handprints, moving up the basement walls. The stairs creaked behind me, like someone was coming up. I slammed the door shut and shoved a chair in front of it. I didn't go near that basement again. The final night was the worst. We were all asleep when the house exploded in sound. Banging, scratching, screaming from inside the walls. Every window slammed open. The crucifix in the living room twisted upside down. I ran to grab the kids, but my youngest, he was floating. Yes, floating. In the air above his bed, arms stretched out like he was being pulled. We screamed his name. Phil grabbed him, yanked him down. He was ice cold. Then we heard the voice again, deep, growling. Leave, or be taken. That was it. We didn't pack. We didn't look back. We got in the car and drove, and never returned. We left the Hinsdale house behind, but the house didn't leave us. For years I'd wake up at 3 a.m., the same time it all began. I'd hear scratching in the walls, whispers. I kept seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. Even after moving across the country, it followed me. A priest once told me, sometimes when you survive something evil, it marks you. I believe him now, because whatever we met in that house, it was ancient, angry, and it never wanted us to leave alive. Some houses are haunted by memories, others by things we'll never understand. I don't expect you to believe everything I've said, but I promise you this, that house is real. The screams were real. The fear was real. If you ever find yourself in the hills of Hinsdale, New York, don't go inside that house. You may not make it out. They say everything's bigger in Texas, and that includes the hauntings. When I first laid eyes on the Grove, I was captivated by its beauty. The majestic white columns, the sprawling porch, the rich history. It all seemed perfect. Nestled in the heart of Jefferson, Texas, this home promised a life of quiet charm and southern elegance. But I didn't know the house had a secret, one that would change my life forever. The Grove wasn't just any historic house. It was a house with a dark past, a past that refused to stay buried. What I thought was a new beginning turned into a nightmare. And now I'm sharing this story to warn anyone who thinks they can live in a house untouched by time. Some houses are never really empty. It was 1998 when I first set foot in the Grove. The house, built in 1861, stood proudly in Jefferson, one of the oldest towns in Texas. A real gem, with historical charm that made me feel like I'd stepped back in time. The house had been meticulously restored, with its Greek Revival architecture and classic Southern design. The moment I walked through the front door, I felt like I was in a dream. The high ceilings, the grand staircase, and the light filtering through the old wooden windows. It all felt like something out of a historical novel. The house was empty when I moved in, save for a few pieces of antique furniture left by the previous owner. I was told the place had been featured in magazines and on TV, lauded as a prime example of 19th century architecture. What I didn't know then was that those same accolades came with a darker, hidden reputation. It wasn't long before the rumors began. Locals would smile awkwardly when they learned where I'd moved in, but none of them dared speak too much about the history. They were polite, but I could sense the unease behind their words. The house was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about it. It started with little things. At first I chalked it up to being in an old house, creaking floors, cold drafts, and the occasional misplaced item. But then things began to escalate. Mirrors would inexplicably fall off the wall. At first I assumed they were poorly hung, but after the third time it happened, I began to question everything. One night, while sitting in the living room, I felt an icy breeze rush past me, even though all the windows were tightly shut. I brushed it off as just the house settling. But then it got worse. I started hearing footsteps upstairs, the unmistakable sound of someone walking across the old wooden floors above me when I was alone in the house. The kind of sound you can't ignore. At first I assumed it was my imagination, but after hearing it night after night, I couldn't deny that something was there. And that's when I started seeing things. I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing. and sometimes when I was alone, I could hear whispers. Soft and faint, but distinct enough to make my skin crawl. They sounded like distant voices, murmuring words I couldn't understand. That was when I realized there was more to this house than I ever could have imagined. Then, one night, I saw her. It was a quiet evening, and I was sitting on the front porch of the grove, enjoying the cool evening air. Suddenly, I felt it, a coldness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I turned, and there she was, a woman standing at the edge of the yard. She was dressed in white, her face obscured by long, flowing hair. She stood motionless, staring at me as though she were waiting for something. I froze. My heart raced. I called out to her, but she didn't respond. Instead, she slowly vanished into thin air, like smoke dissipating in the wind. The next day, I asked a local about the woman I had seen. To my surprise, they weren't shocked. In fact, they seemed almost relieved that I had finally encountered her. She was known as Minerva Fox Stilley, a former resident of the house who had passed away tragically many years ago. People claimed she still wandered the grounds, her spirit forever tied to the house. Some said she was looking for something, while others believed she was simply lost, trying to find peace. Whatever the reason, I wasn't the first to see her, and I wouldn't be the last. But it wasn't just her. A few weeks later, I had another eerie experience. It was late at night, and I was sitting by the window, staring out at the quiet street. Suddenly, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, lying in the middle of the street, was a man. He was motionless, staring up at the sky. His body appeared lifeless, like he was injured or dead. Panicking, I rushed outside to help. But as soon as I reached the spot where he had been, there was nothing. The street was empty. The man had disappeared without a trace. The next day, I spoke to my neighbor about it. He looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and caution. "You're not the first to see him," he said. "There's been talk of a black man lying in the street at night. Some say it's connected to the town's dark history, but no one's ever been able to explain it." The more I learned about the town's history, the more disturbing it became. I began researching the house's past, and what I found was chilling. The grove was built by Frank Stilley in 1861, but it had seen more tragedy than any house should. Murders, suicides, and even a hanging had been part of its history. Some of the deaths had been violent, while others were linked to the house's troubled past. There were unmarked graves in the yard, and rumors of a curse that had plagued the Stilley family. As I delved deeper into the house's history, I began to understand the significance of what was happening. The spirits weren't just haunting the house. They were tied to its dark legacy, and they weren't going to leave without being heard. Desperate for answers, I reached out to a paranormal investigation team. They brought in all their equipment, cameras, recorders, and thermometers to capture any anomalies. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. They recorded voices, unexplained cold spots, and strange figures moving in and out of sight. One investigator even claimed to have seen a figure walking through a wall, which had once been a doorway before the house was renovated. It was then that the team suggested we hold a seance, a way to communicate with the spirits that lingered in the grove. At first I was hesitant, but after everything I'd experienced, I agreed. We sat in a circle, hands on the table, candles flickering around us. We asked questions, but the only answer we got was a deep guttural voice that echoed through the room. "Leave now, or you will never leave." That was when the table shook, the candles blew out, and the air turned ice cold. I knew at that moment, this house wasn't just haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by something far darker. After the seance, things escalated. The house seemed to grow angrier, more aggressive. I began to feel trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape. Objects moved on their own. The floors creaked under invisible footsteps. and I could never shake the feeling that I was being watched, even when I was alone. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my things and left the grove behind. Even now, years later, I still feel the weight of what happened there. The house is still standing, waiting for its next occupant. But if you ask me, I'd say the grove is best left alone.